Hello, everyone. I'm Zahava Avend, head of Ellie Miami. Thanks so much for continuing to support us, the community, and the future of your business by tuning in today for episode 4 of the Ellie Digital Series. I wanted to start off today by acknowledging the recent events that have unfolded in the States and expressing how deeply saddened we are by these tragedies. As a company and part of an industry whose purpose is to help people widen their perspectives, embrace diversity, and build communities, we're extremely disappointed by these events, and our thoughts are with everyone who's impacted by them today. We're all in this together, regardless of race, gender, age, or sexual orientation, and we believe that being Ellie Strong means treating everyone with the same level of kindness and respect. With that said, I'd like to introduce today's episode and thank our speakers for taking the time to join us today. We're bringing you some industry veterans who've experienced working with some of travel's most forward-thinking brands and who are now applying their expertise to two truly Ellie-worthy brands, Proper Hospitality and Lock Hotels. Our session leader, Pavia Rosati, is an experienced journalist and the founder and CEO of Fathom, the editorial travel website and concierge service. She's also the co-author of Travel Anywhere and Avoid Being a Tourist. Welcome, Pavia. Today, Pavia is in conversation with Blake Danner, COO of Proper Hospitality. Blake has over 25 years of experience leading business strategy, growth, and development within the travel industry. Blake, thanks to you as well for joining us today. And we also have here Stephen McCall, CEO of Lock Hotels. Over his 23-year career, Stephen has developed a passion for soulful hospitality, leading heavyweight brands like IHG along the way. Welcome, Stephen. We're going to be opening the floor for a live Q&A a little bit later, so please just go ahead and submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to get those answered. Okay, so on this note, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Pavia, and I'm going to join the rest of you in the audience and listen in. Pavia, over to you to get started.
Thank you, Zahava, for the warm intro. Thank you to the Ellie community for tuning in to join us. And thank you to Stephen and Blake, who will bring a wealth of experience to share with us in different perspectives from the UK and the US. And speaking of the US, as Zahava has said, it's a moment where the United States was beginning to emerge from lockdown and has been thrown into nationwide civil unrest and protests. I'm in New York City and can hear and smell the protests from my living room. Blake will talk about how these protests have impacted their reopening plans, especially in Santa Monica. I'd like, however, to begin by asking each of you to give us a quick overview of your hotels, who stays there, what they're like, and whether you were forced to close during COVID-19. Stephen, I'd like to begin with the 4 Lock hotels in the UK, 2 in London and 1 each in Manchester and Edinburgh.
Thanks, Pavia, and hi everyone, how are you doing? It's a great pleasure to be with you. Talk a little bit about Lock. It's probably not a brand many of you are familiar with. We're quite young. So as Pavia said, we've got 4 Locks open. I say open, I'll come on to our open-closed experience in a little bit. 2 in London, 1 in Manchester, 1 in Edinburgh in the UK. We've got 11 under construction, so pretty aggressive growth plans across Western Europe, although those have been delayed somewhat, obviously, given what we've gone through in the last couple of months. Now, I've been with the business, I guess, 18 months, so not all that long. And you would have thought by this point, I would be able to explain exactly what Lock is in very specific terms and with no ambiguity. Part of the joy of the brand, actually, is that it's quite hard to pin down. But probably the best way to think of it is if you imagine beautifully designed apartments combined with all the best features of a really great lifestyle hotel, sort of activated, animated common spaces, great bars, great cocktail restaurants, all locally run, co-working, wellness, all of that sort of stuff. So all combined into this package. I think the commonly used phrase, which we really hate, is apart hotel, but if it helps you sort of pin that in your mind, then that's kind of what it is. And really the philosophy behind Lock is to create hotels that we want to stay in, right? Most of us who've been in hospitality all our lives. It's resolutely anti-big brand, but also very endearingly democratic. So we don't really fix what we're doing at a particular demographic, but each Lock is different. So we have a different design philosophy, and each Lock is centered around a muse, which sort of resonates with the locality, the kind of cultural and and socioeconomic background of the area. So they should have something of a sense of place. Although we don't stick to it too rigorously. More than anything else, the point about Lock is to provide a soulful experience. That's what we do, right? So great food, great company, good times, fun, love, and laughter. That's kind of Lock in a bottle. And so that's a little bit about the brand. The parent company is called Eden. We also have a UK mainstream service department business, which I don't think we're going to be talking about too much today. It's mostly about Lock. But that's my intro, such as it is. Pavi, will that do just now? Do you want me to go into a bit more depth?
Just super quickly, the openings during the crisis and what stayed open.
Yeah, so we have 3 Locks open just now. Broken Wharf, which was our most recent opening, it's in the north bank of the Thames, just across from the Tate Modern. It is still closed just now, though we hope to open it at the beginning of July. And we've tried to open and close our hotels according to the sort of demand, as well as obviously the government regulations. So right now, across both our brands, both Lock and our service department brands, we've got about 70% of our rooms open, which really is quite good for the UK. We're running something around 45% occupancy. The rates are certainly not record-breaking, but sort of more importantly to us, we're offering a service to key workers across the UK, as well as people who don't have anywhere else to stay and who are looking for a sort of longer-term abode. So we've kind of moved into sanctuary phase just now, and we see that as a bit of a obligation as well as an opportunity for the business. So we're sort of 3/4 open and sort of nearly half full. Not stunning, but we've certainly fared a lot better than traditional transient hotels in the UK have recently.
Thank you so much. Blake, tell us about the 3 propers in Austin, San Francisco, and Santa Monica and Los Angeles.
Sure, I would love to. First of all, good morning, everyone. Coming to you from Santa Monica, California, so still morning to us. Pavi, I thank you for graciously recognizing what we're going through in the unrest that's here in the States. I have to be honest, at one point, I was considering not participating today because there's so many distractions and so many other priorities, but I decided that I wanted to participate because I actually think this is a really important conversation. I want us to talk about how we get our industry back on its feet. I wake up every morning right now and think to myself, how do I bring back more of our employees and how do we get them back to work quicker? I think there are probably many people who are participating on this call who have been personally impacted by our ceasing of operations and what's happened to our industry. So important conversation. I want to be a part of it and I look forward to it today. So let's talk about Proper Hotels. So Proper Hotels was created about 4 years ago to be a home base for creatives and the modern traveler. We position ourselves at the luxury end of the boutique segment. We have elevated and very uncommon design by masterclass instructor and designer Kelly Wurzler. We're a very design-forward brand, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what that means in this whole reopening process. We are absolutely inspired by collaborations in the culinary and wellness space. Look, at the end of the day, that forms our live proper mentality. And I think, again, we'll talk about this, but, we are a brand that is focused on travel as experiential. We know our customers expect an experience from us. We are not a commodity. And we'll talk about, I think today, I hope, how that manifests itself in our reopening strategy. Really quickly, our first proper opened in San Francisco proper. We then followed up with Santa Monica proper, our flagship property. On January of this year, we opened Austin proper hotel. And later this year, we will open downtown LA proper. We also have the Avalon brand in our portfolio, our boutique small gym hotels in Beverly Hills and Palm Springs. And then I'm excited to announce to you, and many of in the LA community know, that on June the 22nd, just 3 weeks from now, we will launch a new brand, a more accessible, more affordable version of Proper, which is Hotel June. Hotel June, our very first one, will be on the west side of Los Angeles, and we're sticking to our June 22nd opening date.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank
the
you.
openings, yeah.
Yeah. So look, unfortunately and it was a tough decision to make, as I know everyone understands, but we did cease operations at all of our hotels. But I'm happy to report at this very moment, we are in some phase of reopening at every single property. I've learned not to say we're open and closed because there is a unique challenge, as I think all of you know, reopening properties and trying to navigate this network of local ordinances and requirements by government. So I've learned not to just say we're open, because each hotel is opening based on what is allowed in their local jurisdiction, and it's different everywhere. So I've learned to be very specific. We're opening in phases at all of our properties today.
That's such an important point that we'll be getting into later, how the property can maybe be wanting to make one decision, but in fact, you're not the only decision maker who is a stakeholder in what you are and are not able to do. But what I want to do, I want to get right to the heart of the matter. And I want to talk about the ways in which you guys have planned like a boss. How have you had to evolve your business plans and strategies in the next few months? Stephen, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, some context around the way we're thinking about this may be helpful. We've talked sort of ad nauseum over the last 2 months about what the future holds. And like many of you, I guess, I've done very little but listen to commentators, panelists, and everybody trying to sort of predict the future. And, you know, it's both fascinating and tiring at the same time, because there's so much uncertainty around this that any attempt to do anything resembling strategic planning or long-term planning is really, I think, an exercise either in futility or an extreme risk, right? So if you make, like, think about the asset cycle, think about how long it takes to open it, to build a hotel, to open it, to develop it, and how much of the design and the layout of the hotel is hard-coded way in advance, right? You know, any fundamental decisions you make about changing the pattern, the nature, the layout, the design, the philosophy of the hotel at this stage in the evolution of this pandemic means you're locked into it for a long time, right? So you either sit in, there's one of two camps. There's the kind of what I would call the pessimistic camp, which means, you know, the travel has changed forever. Hospitality will never be the same again. And we're entering a new world of distancing and caution and risk aversion, et cetera, et cetera. Or you sit maybe in the optimistic camp, which is where I am, which is, you know, this is for sure being an incredible and novel experience for everyone, and pretty horrendous for lots of people. But it's not the first time hospitality has taken a real shock, maybe not like this before, maybe not quite so extreme, but it always recovers because it's in people's nature to get together, right? That community, the social aspect, you know, we've been sitting around campfires sharing food for thousands of years, and it's just the way we're programmed. So if you have faith in that, and I think this community probably does, then you have to hope and you have to believe that people want to gather again and gather in groups, right? So I sort of subscribe to that. That being the case, then what we've tried to do at Eden, and specifically with the Lock brand, is to be very sensitive to the changing atmosphere, but to be quite clear and unapologetic in the fact that we're reacting in quite short term to what's happening, the way the events are unfolding. So we will make adaptations for sure, and that's important. And the safety of our guests and our staff is obviously paramount. But we don't want to lose the soul and the essence of hospitality at the same time. So the adaptations that we've had to make, we've tried to do it for the short term and to make it temporary. And I think what I've been most impressed with, particularly with my organization, but with a lot of other players in the industry as well, is that kind of short-term adaptability and the ability to quite quickly flick and change aspects of business models to suit, you know, an environment that we've just never seen before. So I think planning like a boss might be over-egging it. But we sort of talk about business yoga, which is not just in terms of flexibility and the ability to rapidly morph your kind of point of view and your perspective on all aspects of experience and hospitality, but also in having like a stillness of mind. I don't want to beat the analogy to death, right? But you have to be able to let go of certain things with a degree of calmness. So we have all sorts of plans that we've maybe shelved in some areas because it just doesn't look like they're going to fly for a little while. We've had operators, collaborations, and partners that we've been really excited about working with, and some of that's been put to the back of a queue. And you have to just make peace with that because it will come back. So I don't want to disappoint anybody by not having an amazing answer to how you have a strategic approach to the long-term recovery through a pandemic. But I would treat with caution anybody who says they do. I know Blake's not going to say he does either, otherwise I'll be insulting him. That's certainly our view, but take it for what it's worth, because nobody's got a book on this, right? Nobody's done it before.
I think that's an incredibly valuable thing to say and to hear. And for the people who are listening, if they're wondering, how come I don't have all the answers, it's probably really helpful to hear that you don't either have all the answers. And I do think that business yoga, you can beat the metaphor to death a couple more times, because it's a really, really good one. The idea of being flexible with the changes that are coming, I think it's critical right now, because things are changing so quickly. And I know that conversations that seemed so important 3 weeks ago don't seem to be happening as much anymore. Blake, let's shift over to you and what you've been doing and seeing with Proper Hospitality, please.
Sure. So look, I keep asking myself, is it helpful to the LE community that Stephen and I are so well aligned on these topics, or should I take contrarian and somehow come up with something different? And look, I think the message that you're hearing from two independent hoteliers who operate in this space is a very similar message. So let me talk about working like a boss first. Look, let's not sugarcoat this. Many of the participants on this call, their organizations, our organization, has gone through traumatic change over the last few months. We've furloughed many employees. We've ceased operations. We've cut back services, all incredibly traumatic events. And so as a boss, what I've learned is that now more than ever, I have to give specific direction. I have to be incredibly empathetic. I have to admit, to Stephen's point, that my crystal ball is no good anymore. All the things I knew used to be certain are not now. And I have to be incredibly transparent. Our employees, and I have to remember that all of the colleagues that I work with, not only are they dealing with what we're dealing with professionally, but, half of them now are doing it, with kids at home racing around behind their Zooms. And so there's this whole other set of issues that our colleagues are dealing with that I need to be empathetic to and sensitive to and try to manage around. So I think as a boss, what I've learned is this level of remote working, this level of transparency that I have to give, and just my fervish fever to get everyone back. I will say Stephen and I share an incredibly optimistic view that travel will come back. I think we share an incredibly optimistic view that what made Proper special before is going to make Proper special after, and we must resist the temptation to dumb it down. Let me tell you, I've had the privilege, last week I flew to San Francisco, spent 3 days with our San Francisco team, interacted with customers. This past weekend, I flew to Austin, Texas, spent 3 days with our Austin team and with customers. And I'm telling you, we've got to do it in a safe manner. And we'll talk about that in a second. I hope to elaborate more on kind of what that means. But, I remain optimistic. What I'm already seeing, keep in mind, Texas is kind of on the forefront of the return, if you will. But what I saw in Texas was a zest for human travel, a zest to get back out and experience it, but to do it in a safe and controlled manner, and for us to be able to deliver on that safety promise. So, in the short run, I think, as a leader, that's what I'm focused on. And, we can talk about kind of how that manifests itself at the properties as we move on.
Let's actually talk about that right now.
Sure.
Can you get into some of these operational details and the things you've had to change including safety protocols, touchless service? How have you modified amenities like F&B, the gym? Are there any design tweaks in your fantastic lobbies that are really built for social closeness, not distancing?
So let me just say that everything Stephen told you is true, because I've now gone out and experienced it. So, we spent the time off, as I call it, coming up with all of these, just racing to create touchless check-in, keyless entry, virtual menus. We spent all this time making sure that we really responded to what all the experts were telling us. And let me tell you, at our hotels, guests are saying, no, I'd actually like a key. No, can you hand me a menu? The response that we're getting from our customers is that they came to us to experience the proper experience. And they are not willing, in many cases, to completely dumb it down. And so we are trying to find that new balance between, oh, okay, wait a minute, all of these things that we thought were going to be so important to them don't seem to be as important, but we have a responsibility to protect them. We have a responsibility to protect our colleagues. So now it's, okay, well, if I have to hand them a hard key, how do I do it in a sanitary manner? If I'm going to deliver not a virtual menu, how do I make sure I have one-touch disposable menus? In social distancing, how do we respect it and hold people to it, but not have them feel monitored? So, I think, what Stephen's point is that we're all finding this on our own. We have a huge obligation to make our customer feel safe, but they are giving us feedback now that we're open that tells me that some of the assumptions we made during this off time weren't true. You asked one really important question. And I'll finish. You asked one really important question I'm gonna double down on, Pavia, which is, look, our hotels are known for our design, and we made a distinct decision. We are not going to dumb down our design. We're not going to empty out our lobbies. But what we are going to do is place some spaces out of use. We are going to create social distancing, but we're not going to interrupt and disrupt what makes us special. Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
No, I think I was just going to agree with you on a couple of points. Like, I think we've been open in some of our properties throughout this crisis, and I think the governmental guidelines are different depending on which country you live in. But we've had to feel our way through it, and we've done that really by speaking to our guests and finding out what their risk tolerance is, because it's very different. So for some guests, we leave the housekeeping materials for them to clean their own rooms, their own apartments, because they don't want housekeeping in there, And so other guests are not bothered, quite relaxed about it. We have to protect our staff as well, so we've sort of somewhat reluctantly put up some perspex screens, which we'll be removing as soon as we're permitted to do that. And we've had to zone off some areas of our lobbies. But throughout this, we've tried to keep a sense of care and a sense of consideration for people's different stages. Because at the start of this, it was quite scary for many people. That's becoming less so, I think, as it evolves and we understand the pandemic a little bit better. But we've tried to evolve as well, I guess. So, we've worked with our F&B partners. One of our operators, particularly a group called the Initiative Group, have changed because restaurants are closed just now. So they've morphed their offering into sort of a twofold service. So one is they're offering us like an artisan grocery store for guests, so that they can take beautifully fresh produce and dry goods up to the room to cook, because our apartments obviously have kitchens in them. But they're also running a chef masterclass series, a supper club, so that our guests can watch a chef, taking them through the preparations of a meal, and we'll deliver an ingredient box to them. We do that for residents and outside our community as well. So it's become actually quite a lucrative prong to these guys' boats when they look at this, at trying to evolve their offering. Now, will that last beyond COVID? Is it more successful than restaurants will be? It really depends how quickly demand comes back. But the idea is to continue to offer experiences as something deeper than just a functional stay to guests, because many of them are with us for quite a long time. Some of our average length of stay in some of our properties now at 40 days, given the conditions that some people find themselves in and the lack of alternatives. So, if you've got people in house for that length of time, you've got to provide more than just, a cleaning service.
They become roommates at a certain point.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm interested what the guest reaction has been and how it wasn't necessarily what you were thinking of. I wonder if you have any thoughts, Blake, about whether the first wave of people who are coming back are the travelers who are more intrepid anyway, and are the people who are anxious to get out of the house, and whether you haven't thought ahead maybe a few months from now when the more nervous traveler starts to come out, if they won't be a little more hesitant about some of the precautions.
Yeah, so you just nailed it. So listen, we had a lot of internal discussions based on this first set of, kind of feedback is, well, do we relax things? Do we make changes? Do we take some of this technology away? And our answer is not yet. And the reality is, I do think this first set of travelers is a little fearless. Mm-hmm. I think that's the reason they were able to get on the road quickly. I think that because they're a little fearless, they're a little less worried. Maybe they have, less underlying health conditions, et cetera. All those reasons that would make you kind of this first wave of traveler. We think that the next wave of traveler, who maybe is traveling because they need to, not because they want to, they will be more suspect. They will be more demanding. So, and don't forget, as operators, we have two obligations. I have an obligation to respond to our guests, but I also have an obligation to protect our colleagues who are now saying, wait a minute, I'm coming in contact with a lot more of the public. So I think the answer to your question is, we're not going to relax anything that we've done. We're going to try to respond to what our customers are telling us they want. We're going to try to Stephen's point, we're going to try to, cater the experience to them. But I think it's too early to relax any of the precautions that we've taken. I do think there is a next wave of customer who's going to really focus on the health and safety that we've provided, and we've got to prove it.
Blake, what does that mean for your mask policies? What are the hotel mask policies?
Well, so first, let me just tell you that we've done a lot of training trying to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we're in hospitality, and sometimes it's really tough to be overly hospitable when this is all the customer sees. So a lot of focus on eye, voice inflection, hand gestures. We currently have a mask policy at all of our properties. We also are taking temperatures for all colleagues and all guests as they enter the building. And again, the initial response from customers is that it might be overkill, but we're not ready to let up on that. We're still going to do it for two reasons. One, we think currently it is the right guidance and it's the right thing to do. Two, most guests are respectful, even if they don't particularly think it's necessary. And three, we have a real obligation to protect our colleagues and make sure they feel safe. So we'll continue to do that. I will tell you that travel to San Francisco, it is kind of the culture there to wear masks. So everyone had on masks, it's no big deal. Traveled to Texas, it is not as much of the culture in Texas. The government is not focused as much. So, it is clearly different regionally. And I think we may end up having to respond to that.
Speaking of regional differences, Stephen, you don't have a mask policy that sounds like Blake's.
No, I get maybe London's a bit more like Texas than I ever thought, but
you heard it here for the first time ever.
I might not say that again. The UK government was actually fairly quiet on masks to start with. And then there was a sort of active discouragement because the belief was there was no scientific evidence that it really worked, and it encouraged a false sense of security. And then that kind of died away, and there was some concern that there were shortages of PPE in the UK, and therefore if you had a mask, you should really be giving it to someone who needs it, like a key worker or a medical worker. And by that point, I think everybody had just kind of given up. I think you don't see many of them. For sure, there's masks in the street where you wouldn't have seen them before. It's certainly optional for our staff and guests, and we provide it wherever it's requested. But it's not really a big thing in the UK. And again, this has been the odd phenomenon. It's a global pandemic, but a decidedly regional response. And every government claims to be following the science, but it's just not as easy as that, I suppose. And we're all expecting, domestic travel to be, a large part of our revenues, such as they are, for quite some time to come. And when international travel comes back, we're going to have to get used to different expectations from different segments of guests. So, I've got to believe that, and I hope this isn't a surprise to any, I'm sure it's not, but I've got to believe this pandemic or some iteration of it is with us at least until we have a vaccine. I've got to believe that vaccine is some time off. So there is an imperative around adjusting to the practicalities of life, and I think different people will look at that in different ways. For some people, it's perfectly reasonable and acceptable to spend much of the time in a mask. For others, it's an absolute imposition. So, I think it's very much dependent on local situations. And again, the most successful hospitality offerings are the ones that can adapt to the situation on the ground, as opposed to necessarily a sort of vague piece of guidance from above.
Well, it raises a really good point, and your different points of view really underline the fact that your decision making can only go so far and will be impacted by the decisions that your national, that your state, that your local governments are making. And we've seen in the United States, Blake, that often it's at cross purposes, what we're hearing from the president, what we're hearing from a governor, and what we're hearing from a mayor within a state. And even in terms of local travel, I'm in New York City. If I want to go up to Rhode Island, which is only about an hour from me, they may not want me to even show up. And I haven't left the house without a mask in 8 weeks at this point. It'll be really interesting and strange for me to go to London this summer and see that not everybody's wearing a mask. It's going to take me some getting used to. And I think this will be an interesting thing for you as hoteliers to have to navigate. Is it for the client to adapt to the local environment? Is it for you to adapt to the customer's comfort level? I don't know if you have any thoughts about that balance.
Yeah, look, I think you're going to see us balance two needs, local customer preference and colleague safety. And so I think as operators, and for all of you who are thinking about reopening or in the reopening process, look, you're going to balance how you protect your colleagues who have legitimate concerns about the increased level of exposure they're going to have to the public. And you're going to have, customers who, come with varying degrees of, response on this. What I will say is, look, it will be a balance. And one of the reasons I was so fervent in getting on a plane and actually going to market and seeing and talking to customers is because I wanted to hear firsthand, and I wanted to see firsthand how customers were responding to this whole slew of protocols that we had put in place. And I just wanted to make sure that we were still not losing sight of the fact that we're in hospitality. So we've got to figure all this stuff out and still deliver the experience to the customer. And I'm going to tell you, I was on 7 flights in the last few days. And some of our airline partners, I'm challenging them to remember that this needs to be a hospitable environment as well. Look, I shouldn't have picked out. I shouldn't have picked on airlines. There's all of us who should remember, myself and our company.
Yeah, but
this is still about hospitality.
I wouldn't be too hard, too hard on yourself. I mean, if I think back to the beginning, the start of this virus, I remember the big hotel industry conference in Berlin, IHIF, was cancelled quite early on. And I remember being furious. We'd arranged a massive thing there. We were unveiling, brands, new openings with lots of investors and partners turning up. And I thought it was a massive overreaction. And I was categorically wrong. It was absolutely the right thing to do at the time. And so I think you've got to be very careful about, I'm not a particularly risk-averse person, so I've been trying to be quite careful to try and balance my approach with the general feeling throughout the business and amongst our partners and guests, and particularly our colleagues, as you've mentioned. So, I think everyone's made some false steps in this in some ways, and that's just, the nature of a highly unpredictable situation. I think the trick is not to be too confident in your own point of view and to be prepared to change quite quickly when you're proven wrong. So I've learned a bit of humility maybe during this. Despite my advancing years, I still managed to screw up quite fundamentally on a regular basis.
We covered earlier the fact that you don't believe in crystal balling for the future, although I'm sure that you have wargamed out different options for what happens if there is a second wave, and how are we going to be doing things. In terms of your long-term plans for the hotels, both of your businesses had a lot of launches planned. You had a big strategy for growing over the next couple of years. Very, very quickly, how have your plans changed? Have you just bumped the dates? Are you still full speed ahead? Stephen, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to open 7 locks this year. We opened Broken Wharf 2 weeks before the epidemic, and we had to close it down very quickly, which was a crying shame. We'll open 1, maybe 2 more this year, and the rest into next year, across Berlin, Munich, Dublin, London, various other locations. So we are going to have to just respond to the environment on the ground. There's little point in opening there's zero demand in the market, but we don't think that's going to happen. We're seeing Europe opening up quite quickly. If there's a second wave, we're just going to have to deal with it. I have to believe governments will be very, very reluctant to go into a secondary lockdown. That degree of uncertainty, massively damaging for any business environment. So I'm afraid to say we'll continue to react quite quickly, but we've developed quite a lot of tools, not just revenue tools, but also guest and colleague feedback tools to work out what sort of environment we might be opening into. So we will tread with caution, would be my summary.
Blake, very quickly, what are the plans for the proper openings that you had on deck?
Sure. So look, again, we remain optimistic. Anything that was already in the pipeline, we're moving forward with. So as I mentioned, downtown LA, we actually have benefited, sadly, from COVID. We have more workers on site than we were able to amass prior. So we're moving forward. As I mentioned, we're launching the Hotel June brand. So if it was in the pipeline, it's still moving forward, and we're very committed to it. I will tell you that, again, the ultimate optimist here, for our organization, we think companies like ourselves that have strong infrastructure, a strong brand, actually could see some opportunity in this upcoming market. Sadly, there are going to be, I think, many independent hoteliers who are going to have a hard time weathering, this comeback without some additional help and expertise and brand behind them. So, we are already in talks with multiple, opportunities. So, out of something so horrible, we think there may be opportunities for us to take, our experience and our brand and our infrastructure and help apply it to some independent hoteliers out there who otherwise, are going to find it really hard to compete in this new normal.
Blake, it's like you have ESP, because I was going to say, there's that old cliche that from crisis comes opportunity. Can you get into some specifics of any innovative ideas that you've seen, either new revenue channels, designs, concepts emerge in the last few months? And then Stephen, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah. So look, I don't think that, the world has changed in the regard that I have something that's, the magic solution. I think what we're finding is that we've got to be very flexible and pivot very fast. For instance, reservations by telephone had really been kind of a dying art. Well, what we have found is that our call volumes are up significantly across our properties. So we're doubling back and doing quick training with all of our call agents. We're finding that direct hits to our website have quadrupled. Well, ask the questions, why is all this happening? Well, the reason call volume is up is because customers want to talk with us. They want to ask, what's open in your city? What's open around you? What services are available? So I don't know that I have any, great, magic bullets for you. What I am going to tell you, and for everyone who's on this call, is you really need to kind of take a step back and reevaluate things that weren't so important to you before COVID, things that maybe were not your number one focus or distribution channels have probably changed. So for us, it's been spending a lot more money on SEO to get more eyeballs on our website. It's been focusing those dollars within a 2-hour drive radius. It's been sadly pulling back on our international representation because we don't think those dollars are good dollars spent right now. So, I encourage everyone who's currently in the process of reopening, you have to take a look at your entire toolkit and make a real decision about, is that tool still useful for you? And do you need to maybe look at some of your old tools and pull them back out because they're new again?
Stephen, innovative, great ideas that you've seen?
Yeah, well, I think for us, the challenge has been in Europe that lifestyle boutique aparthotel sector is quite small and not very well recognized and very nascent. So, we don't have the sort of reach and the understanding amongst the hospitality consumers, if you want to call them that, as we would like. What this has done is effectively bring a new accommodation alternative to a wider audience, right? So the ability to spend a longer term in an apartment, looking after yourself if that's what you want, if you feel a bit risk averse, if you don't want to mingle with a wider community, then you have that choice. So it's that the choice between autonomy or community is all under one roof. So we think that our offering will become, a much more relevant and appealing choice to a segment of guests that maybe we didn't reach before, who maybe weren't so aware. So in that sense, it's an opportunity for us to expand our catchment and obviously look at new revenue chains as well. But I think, I think it's important not to regress in this. So I think I mentioned before that you'll see quite a lot of the big brands and big platforms talk about cleanliness as the new thing. I've got to believe that's table stakes and not the fundamentals of any brand. Surely we're better than that. So, while that's going to be important for people and a message that they'll need to hear, if that's the essence of what hospitality is going to look like for the next couple of years, then I'll be both disappointed and a bit alarmed. So I think we have to continue to dig deep, as Blake said, remind ourselves that that hospitality stands for something deeper, something more emotional and a more sustainable connection. And that's got to be the priority. And any innovation or any new avenues around that are the ones we should be exploring.
Thank you. We have some really great questions from the audience that I am going to now turn to. Question, let's start with Stephen. Will you focus even more on local guests, on local guests for the next few months? And will your revenue mix be more focused on F&B as opposed to accommodation?
Yeah, I think inevitably then a large part of our revenue share will be domestic for the time being. That's simply the nature of international travel restrictions. And so that's for sure. I think what we will do though is focus more, even more than we did before, in our local community, not necessarily the people staying with us, but the people we connect with and how they interrelate with the hotel and the facilities in there. I've got to say, I think F&B is going to be a tough one for a while. I still think while any element of social distancing is required, I think hotels will run at short capacity. I think margins will be very squeezed. That's going to be tough, right? So continuing to look at a multiple angle in F&B offerings, including, as I said before, your artisanal groceries, takeaways, cooking, supper clubs, masterclasses, that kind of thing, will be important to keep revenues in that area up. I think revenues will be depressed for a little while longer this year.
Like, the same question.
Sure. So, look, the only thing that Steve and I are going to disagree on in this entire conversation is that we do think food and beverage is going to come back a little quicker. Look, we're blessed that at most of our properties, we have large outdoor outlets. So, again, I was in Austin this past weekend where dine-in has already come back. I had 3 meals out. Every restaurant was packed to their limit of 50% social distancing. So my personal experience is I do think our food and beverage revenues are going to come back a little quicker than people anticipate, which is great news. We're going to do it in a really, thoughtful manner. And, it makes the experience a little bit different. And yes, I think it's just obvious to everyone that, the 2-hour radius is going to be our customer. And that has created a whole set of operational challenges that we have to now deal with. We're parking more cars. We have more people up front. We've had to go out and find alternate lots to make sure that we can handle that demand. Look, we ran 55% occupancy this past Saturday at our Austin property. And that's because we limited the occupancy so that we could make sure that our social distancing and safety protocols were working. So I think the answer is yes to local focus. I'm maybe a little bit more bullish on food and beverage just because I've seen it in market now and because we are blessed with some very large outdoor dining spaces that I think, lend themselves well to social distancing.
Thank you. A question clearly from a hotelier is, what will your strategies be in terms of setting rates for the next coming months, right? Because a local market may have a different set of expectations than a foreign market. So
I'm laughing because I had this conversation with our head of revenue management just a few days ago. We have been operating kind of on sort of offline rescue rates a little bit for the last few weeks. And I said, how do we get back? Because you set your rate based on a number of parameters and metrics, obviously, that don't exist just now. And any sort of pricing system relies on algorithms which have got no data to feed it. So he gave me a very smart reply, which was you just set a rate and see how the market responds. It's just trial and error just now. We haven't got a smarter way of doing it simply because we have regressed a little bit in this sort of environment to old-fashioned rate management. It's just try and test, see what the market's prepared to cope with. And once your demand falls away, then you've hit your ceiling. That's kind of as sophisticated as it gets. I haven't heard a better answer than that, actually. Maybe Blake's got one.
Yeah, does Blake have a better answer?
Yeah, I don't have a better answer. Here's what I'll tell you. Competition and the market sets the rates. So, we're following, the market very closely. But here's what I am absolutely fervent about. Over discounting gets you nowhere. So for anyone who's thinking about it, I would just argue, what good does it do you? We tried it a little bit sporadically, did a couple of elasticity tests, but what I've learned is that, our customer that's coming back to us has a luxury experience expectation, and they're willing to pay for it in this current environment. And frankly, the market is really kind of setting the rates, and we're positioning ourselves, while rates are kind of depressed in our markets, our relative position to the comp set remains about the same as pre-COVID. And we think that's the right thing to do is, kind of follow the hotels that we used to follow, be above the hotels that we used to be above, but resist the temptation to over discount. It gets you nowhere. And quite frankly, in most cases, it starts to change frankly, the guest expectation, it starts to change, put stress on some of your services that you're still trying to work through. So yeah, that's our rate strategy. Try to deliver on the proper promise.
Super helpful. A final audience question, and then I'm going to wrap up with a question about takeaways. With no real specific guidance on how to reopen, and with states and countries all advising differently, which are the resources you're looking to help you guide your decisions? Blake, let's start with you.
Sure. So look, here is the cold, hard reality. Many of you might want me to say the CDC. Many of you might want me to say who. I'm going to tell you point blank, it is the local health department, because it's the local health department that controls what I am allowed to open and or close and how to do it. So, we are very focused on making sure we are subject matter experts on what our localities are telling us, because they are the folks that are saying, okay, this week you can open your pool. Okay, next week you can open your gym. And when you open your gym, you can only open your gym at 25% capacity. Or when you open your pool, you have to be at, so it is by just the nature of how we operate, we've had to really defer to local jurisdictions, because they are the ones controlling how we reopen, at what levels we reopen, and what the requirements are. Then we're placing on top of that what we hope to be, subject matter experts who are giving us advice on how to protect, again, our customers and our colleagues.
Yeah, it's a bit different for us, because in the UK, the government has closed traditional hotels and they remain closed until next month at the earliest. We've been open throughout, more or less, because we're a different kind of offering and we have a sort of longer stay proposition. So we're not really reopened as we are. So we've kind of found our feet. We've found the sort of level of protection that we think is appropriate, given what our guests want and what helps maintain the safety of our colleagues. So without being kind of smug about it, I think we've got a pretty good sense of what works practically, operationally, and what provides the appropriate level of protection. Now, it may well be that guidance changes, but it's always fairly rudimentary anyway. When you get down to the bare bones of it, everybody in the UK, from supermarkets to doctors' surgeries to apart hotels, have had to find that right balance, and the guidance has never been very specific. So it feels like we've reached a sensible and reasonable level, but we always keep it under review. Pavia, it's not a static situation.
Flexibility is one of the key takeaways that you guys have really given us here, right? Be super flexible, be super responsive, adapt quickly. Business yoga. I like business yoga. Stephen, I'm going to steal this one. I think this is a really, really good one.
You know, you like.
So there was a question, and we already know Blake's answer for this. If nothing changes significantly from current ways of coping with the virus, and if we assume flights start again in a reasonable way, how soon do the speakers, that means me too, feel they'll be happy to travel? So Blake, you've been on 7 planes in the last couple of weeks. You're comfortable traveling, right?
Again, I'm that first wave. I'm a bit fearless. Yes, and let me be super clear. I take every precaution. I have 5 masks in my bag. I've got wipes. I'm out there, and I'm trying to do it smartly, and I'm trying to make smart decisions about the risks that I take. But yes, I'm out there.
Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in a plane for quite a while, and the UK is going to impose a short-term quarantine on anyone coming back into the country. So the prospect of a flight means a two-week lockdown, which nobody wants. So it's a little way off for me. I am not particularly risk averse. I'm quite happy to jump in a flight. I'm not sure my wife agrees. Our holiday to Mykonos in a couple of weeks has been cancelled, unfortunately. I would probably wear a mask on a plane, I think, just because it's sensible, I suppose. Doesn't do any harm, and who knows. But I don't really have any real reservations about traveling. But then I guess I'm low risk. I'm still relatively young, healthy, I think. And so it's easy to be relatively blasé under those circumstances, given what we know about the way the virus works. But you've also got an obligation not to spread it as well. So yeah, I'll dip my feet back in the water as soon as I can. I'm desperate to get out to our hotels, our sites, and see our colleagues. But I guess there would be a slight degree of nervousness, not enough to stop me though.
It's funny you
Probably if I
mentioned
can
your,
just-
yes, please jump in.
If I can just add, look, again, I don't take it lightly. I do it, I hope, with smart intentions, but I just want to point out, because it's so important to everyone on this phone call, that, of those 7 flights, 5 of them were absolutely booked to capacity. So there are people who are traveling in certain parts of our country who have, in their mind, low risk factors. And I will tell you, social distancing was at a height. Everyone on the planes had masks. But I think it is a encouraging sign. I'm not suggesting reckless abandon here. I'm suggesting that there are travelers who are back out in the market who are taking, mitigated, smart, informed, well-informed decisions.
We lost Blake for a second, but his point is really what, is a very good one and very well taken. Blake, we lost you for a half second there.
I think you probably heard, heard the most of it. People are back out.
Stephen raises a really good point. I'm super risk averse, but my husband is no, I'm not risk averse. My husband is. And so last night I wanted to go outside when I heard the protests, and my husband was like, do I need to lock you in the house? No, you are not going outside to the protests. And the mask issue, quite frankly, it's a comfort level for me. The idea, the places that I want to go, I want to go to London and I want to go to Italy. Between leaving the house and getting to where I'm going, I'm looking at about 15 hours all told between the airport and the flight, and breathing at 60% capacity through an N95 mask. Not super comfortable. When the free private jet shows up to take me to London, I'll go there tomorrow. I have no problem with that. The plane is the really big hurdle for me. So I think we're going to be focused a lot this summer on traveling locally, staying with friends. But oh my God, I cannot wait to get out into the world with a little bit of reckless abandon.
It's going to be carnage. Everybody feels the same as you. Can you imagine how many parties? Can you imagine? I can't wait. Get your training in now, I think. Build some resilience.
So listen, thank you so much, Blake and Stephen, for these great wisdom, your candor, your incredible insights.
Thank you.
I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you for all of your really good questions and the contributions. I hope you found today's session as useful and insightful as I have. Next week was due to be in LA Miami 2020, and I'm really sad that we're not all there together in real life, listening to great bands and dancing around the pool at the W. Keep in mind, our pals at LE will continue to bring us fantastic programming for the next several weeks. Keep an eye out for in your emails. They've done a fantastic job of communicating everything that they're doing. I've been so impressed, LE team, with how on it and organized you are. You really run fantastic shows, and believe me, I'm sorry that I'm missing you in person. So that's it for us. Thanks once again to these panelists for having been so insightful and terrific.
Stay safe,
everybody,
everyone. Stay safe.
A great day. Good vibes. Stay safe. We will all be together very soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much.